right, welcome to the Wealthy Ironworker Podcast. Now, today's podcast episode actually kicks off something I'm very excited about, and it's going to be something that you're going to see routinely over and over again. It's called the Apprentice Spotlight Series. Now, it's one of the 4 or 5 series that we're going to have here on the podcast, but what it's going to do is I want to interview apprentices, whether it doesn't matter what trade. You know, if you're an ironworker, electrician, pipe fitter, etc., I want to talk to you. I want to know what the trade has been for you. What's the apprenticeship been like for you? How did you hear about it, etc.? And just give you a platform and a voice. You know, us older folks, a lot of times we end up just dismissing younger people, but younger people are the future. And so today's podcast episode is going to be the first of many in the Apprentice Spotlight Series. So let's pick it up where the episode starts. Thanks for joining. All right, man. Well, look, first off, I want to say thanks. I really appreciate you taking the time to, out of your busy schedule, out of, trying to line this all up and come on the podcast and then basically tell everybody what I'm really excited about, which is I'm calling it the Apprentice Spotlight Series. We do a lot of virtue signaling, and a lot of us older folks, I consistently include myself into that, but a lot of older folk talk, it's the gray beard, right? But a lot of older folks, what we do is, we sit here and take these complex problems and we go, well, these young people just don't want to work. And that hasn't been my experience. And it's not true. And no matter how you feel about young people, y'all are the future. Yep. And this idea that we need to open up the communication dialogues, I just wanted to give a lot of younger people a platform to have a conversation and say, okay, look, tell me about especially from apprenticeship, perspective and what's going on. And so, this is the first of what I suspect are going to be numerous episodes where I have apprentices on, and I just, back and forth dialogue. Let's just talk. Let's just talk about what you're experiencing. Like, what is your, what have you seen up to this point, et cetera. So, I got my questionnaire, and I did send it to you to kind of give you a little bit of ballpark to kick the gears around a little bit, but I've got it in front of me on my other computer here, and I'll just go ahead and I'll ask the questions. I'll let you respond, and maybe I'll have some follow-ups or whatever. The first one, right, if you just take 5 minutes or whatever it is that you feel like you need to adequately go, okay, tell people who might be listening or watching, depending on how they're consuming the podcast, about yourself, your background, you growing up, that kind of thing. Because it plays a significant part into whether or not you were raised with a stigma that has been inadvertently attached to the trades, or maybe that didn't happen in your background, right? So just take a little bit of time and just tell us who you are, background, et cetera, and I'll be quiet. And
Charles Tait, born and raised Conyers, Georgia, 28 years old, almost 29. So growing up in a small town, you pretty much had no clue what ironwork was until now, But I had seen different buildings going up and stuff. And, living near Atlanta is all everything's always booming. It's just gotten worse over the years. I'm going to say I had an okay childhood. It wasn't like I wasn't running around with iPads or anything. I don't think anybody was back then. But, I didn't get the greatest of all things, kind of just living within the means, Couple different high schools, couple different middle schools, couple different elementary schools. I don't know, everything, the other kids were getting, I pretty much had to work for, I'd be out there with a lawnmower cutting grass, saving up $20 a lawn, that kind of background, small family, we all stayed close within like 20 minutes of each other. If somebody needed help at one house, we'd all kind of flock to that house to help them out. And they do the same for us, and then growing up with 2 sisters, I don't know, kind of led by example. I taught them stuff, growing out in the woods, taught them stuff about, the different snakes and stuff they need to watch out for, how to identify them, what plants to stay away from, It's very simple things, simple kind of growing up. When I graduated high school, I wanted to originally be an engineer, but then I kind of rethought the whole college deal. I thought about, the money that would be spent for college and, that was also kind of riding off of the fact of like, not growing up with much, working for your own stuff. I
Right.
thought about, I had no clue how my parents would come up with the money or how I get scholarships. So I was kind of like, oh, well, let's backtrack on that. And then I decided I wanted to go in the military. So I was kind of deciding what branch at that point. I was in Marine Corps JROTC, so I had all the instructors there oorahing me on to go Marine Corps. And then I turned around last minute and said, you know what, let's give the Air Force a shot. So I ran that route, went into security forces, tactical police, stuff like that. And it just wasn't the experience that I thought it was going to be. So I got out, came back home, had two kids in the meantime. When I got home, I had my first son. And then a year and a half later, I ended up having my other son, so back to back. Tried a couple different trades. I started plumbing at first because it was the first thing that popped up. And I'm sure you know as much as I do, work when you got kids, work is mandatory. So I went
Yep.
straight to work. I started doing good at it, and I walked in and asked for my first raise and got a no. So I kind of walked back out to my truck and just left. Never came back. yeah. Like, then I jumped into some tree work. Tree work was good, but I just couldn't stand working around a bunch of different people that were on drugs in tree field. Sometimes it just becomes a safety issue. Had to kind of evaluate and went back to plumbing for a little bit. Different company, different standards, commission based or commercial and residential. And I liked how that rolled, but I didn't like how they sold it. I couldn't see selling a 70-year-old woman that could barely walk through her house a new toilet when she didn't need a new toilet just because it was commission.
Mm-hmm.
It just wasn't right to me. It wasn't how I was raised.
Right.
So I didn't do too well in it. Had to bounce out of that. Did fiber optic work. That was actually interesting. That's a good body workout. I'll tell you what. Doing fiber optic work, having to figure eight different like 10,000 feet of fiber optic cable through a hole. Yeah, that's lots of moving. And then in 2019, I got an opportunity to move up here to Virginia, and I took it. When I first got here, I was debating on, well, there's one thing I know, and that's military. I
Mm-hmm.
know they'll take me back, and I went to the Army and was talking to them. Had debated on going back in there. And I guess to avoid me moving, taking the kids and everything, my mother-in-law at the time, she talked to Dickie Cattle. She spoke with Dickie Cattle, Atlantic Constructors, and set me up an interview, got me a slot. It's pretty bad, though. I showed up probably about 30 minutes late to the interview because I was dealing with the kids and swapping off with the old lady at the time. So you can already imagine, who Dickie is. So when I got there, I didn't know he was offering an apprenticeship. And at that time, I was still talking to the Army. And I told him that. I said, well, if it was just a job, it'd be different. But you're offering me, an apprenticeship, a schooling, and I don't know if I'm going to have to stop midway. So I appreciate your time. And he said, well, let me know what you want to do when you grow up. Handed me a business card. Oh, that lit a fire. But a couple of weeks later, I processed the thought of, hey, I've already done the military thing. I didn't really like it. I understand work's work, but maybe I should just drop back and punt and try this apprenticeship thing out. So I called Dickie back up, and he scheduled to have me come in, gave me the paperwork to go to Local 79. I went over to Local 79, talked to them, got all signed up. Didn't know what I was signing for, never heard of Ironwork. You know, and then that September, that was February of 2020. And then, of course, COVID hit and working through COVID and wearing the masks and stuff all over the shipyard, things like that. Uh, started my apprenticeship in September, rolling since. So,
Yeah. So let me ask you: have you, up until that point, up until the point that he actually was telling you, hey, what do you want to do when you grow up? Tell me what you want to do when you grow up, and was telling you that obviously you'd be a part of an apprenticeship program. Had you actually heard of an apprenticeship program before then?
no, the only
Whether it's
thing
from
I'd really,
parents or anything like that.
I can say the only real thing I could that could have been close to that is Job Corps. They were telling me Job Corps. Everybody at, in the next county over was talking about how they're going to Job Corps to be a welder. They had in one of my high schools that I went to, they had an auto hobby shop where they'd bring in old beat up cars and fix them up, as a class, or they had I went to Troop County Comprehensive High School, and that's where they had the auto hobby. They also had gosh, I can't remember what the class was called, but we had everything from graphic design to video recording and editing to flight simulators to the wood shop. So that was probably the closest I gotten to anything of trades. I didn't know that any of the fiber optic work or anything like that was called trades. I really didn't until I got into this career field and went, started in the apprenticeship and they called it a trade. I was thinking, okay, well, that means electrician's trade. Okay, that means, fiber optic people are trade. So it got to a point of me just, I evaluated everything and that's how I learned what a trade was, you know?
Right. Right. And well, it's very illustrative. I got this. It's one of the questions that I'm gonna be very bullish on asking every single apprentice that I have come through, because on the Apprentice Spotlight Series flyer that I've made up, and I'm gonna begin to start sending it out because I want a continual. I want to have a lot of apprentices on, and I want to have them from various trades. But I'm pretty sure I already know the answer to this, but I have talked over and over and over again, and there's so many statistical studies out there that demonstrate guidance counselors and people of influence within a young person's life, they don't tell them. If I was going to be nice and say, okay, well, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt and say that maybe you just don't know, and that's certainly possible. What may actually be happening is that a lot of guidance counselors and educators, that's the route that they took, going to a higher educational trajectory. And so maybe they feel like that's the only way to go. Because most of the time, even when I, came through, it was okay. Well, you got to go to college, get a good job, or you can go into the military. And
Yep.
these are the only two routes that you have. If you're anywhere in the middle, you're like this loser. So I want to give them the benefit of the doubt and say, well, maybe there's a lot of guidance counselors out there who just don't know that registered apprenticeship programs, the golden standard for apprenticeships, are out there, and they afford a lot of good people a lot of great opportunity to provide for their family. I'm going to take a guess and say that was not discussion point with you with a guidance counselor or any educator at your schooling at all.
No, any of I went to 3 different high schools. The first one pushed a lot of military and a lot of college. You had these, different fairs where all colleges would come in and they'd set up their stands and show what they offered and things like that, And of course, the military shows up. The Marines with the pull-up bar, they catch all the attention, the Army out there standing in their, berets and everything looking cool. The second high school, same thing, had a big commons area, and the Marines pretty much ran it all. Brought the pull-up bar in, the whole thing. Hey, son, you look like you can do 100 pull-ups. Get you to come over there trying to prove, you're big and bad. Now the third high school, the only thing they had that was out of that was a career academy. But the career academy still had more of like college driven stuff. They had culinary, arts, things like that. They it was all that kind of deal, of what it really didn't lead toward any trades. It didn't show you how to mess with electrical. It didn't show you how to, how to weld. It didn't really show you all that. So
Yeah.
I'll take a guess that they pretty much. I mean, I don't want to say that it's pretty much college driven. I would say, in my own opinion, most of American high schools would probably be more college driven. They just drive it into your head to go to college. Even to the point of like the military is even getting scarcer in terms of like showing up to a school and giving some direction in that aspect.
I was seeing in this age of content, it's kind of interesting. There were, and I need to find this. It probably would be really easy to see it, but there were two recruiters talking, and I don't remember what branch they were from, but they were talking about how people were graduating and coming to try and come into the military, and they couldn't read. I was like, that's amazing to me. At the
Yeah.
same time that we're facing, I want to say there was a report a while back that said something to the effect of, I think the total armed forces in general were about 25% down on their recruitment numbers of what they were looking to do. So, and I haven't corroborated this, but somebody had told me in conversation that they had even dropped the requirement to have a high school diploma.
Hmm.
That was what they were looking to get people into. But at the same time, you got recruiters sitting here going on podcasts talking about how people are graduating either from high school or college and had trouble reading at a specific level. And I thought that is mind blowing to me,
Yeah.
that this continual push of you got to go to college to get a good job has done it has done some significant damage to the cultural fabric, if you will. It has pretty much eroded the foundation of a higher education, as well as put this stigma on the trades, which leads me into my next question for you. Is What are your thoughts? I mean, you've come through an apprenticeship now. I believe you just finished up, right? So you've done 4 years. Yeah, man. Hey, listen, congratulations, by the way, because
Thank you.
that's something to be supremely proud of. Uh, what's been your experience? Going through the apprenticeship. I mean, different ones, different trades, and different places have different models. They have
Yeah.
they might have a weekend model. Some will have a block scheduling. Whatever it happens to be. But what's your thoughts on it? Like, how was it? How was it good for you? What did it enable you to do?
So I'll say the first part of my apprenticeship was, you would go during the week after work. I would say that was kind of distracting though, because I mean, you just got off, 8, 10, 12 hour shift, just enough time to run home. If you got to run home, take a shower, and come to class. By that time, you're super tired. Your brain's on your kids, or your brain's on tomorrow's work. But in the back half of my apprenticeship, we went to the weekends, 1 weekend a month. And that kind of opened things up. That whole weekend was set out for me to do one thing and one thing only, and that was learn what was being taught. There
Yeah,
was no work before, there was no work after. It kind of just set up a schedule where I knew that, toward the end of the month, I'll have to go to class. So I can arrange everything else around it, plan accordingly to be there and be attentive and alert. It would be 8 hours worth. It'd be just like you're in a class, a real, high school class or anything other than that. Um, so that was a good. I think that was a good move when they told me they were going to move. Um, there was some flack about the second year on the back half. This past one about going Friday, Saturday, Sunday rather than Thursday, Friday is Saturday.
hmm,
Because some people, that I will say that Sunday was for me to just relax, take care of everything, and
yeah,
get everything done before starting the next work week. But at the same time, I mean, then you got another day on the books
yeah,
for the next check for the week. You know,
right,
um, so I mean, neither here or there. You plan accordingly, and it worked out pretty good. The instructors did very well. You actually got one-on-one time with the instructors because I'm sure some of the instructors in the first part, they were getting off work too to come teach, so they
hmm,
might not be going as in depth, into some things. They had other things they needed to get home and do, or they had other things in their mind. So things were always kind of rushed. If not, then you're getting home like 10 o'clock at night, just enough time for supper, shower, bedtime. Just
yeah.
to get up and
I do think the block schedule, either block scheduling, or 1 weekend a month, or 3 days, or however it turns out. I do think that move there has become a more embraced model. You not only are you getting, like as you said, more, let's say, one-on-one time or more devoted time towards the school, but the second part about that is you're you're fresh. You're not just burnt out. You're not just burnt out over the whole thing. And I think it's probably a model that there's still some that go to, let's say, night school.
yeah,
And there's people resist change for all sorts of reasons. But I think that as the technology just continues to bombard everybody, I think there's going to be more and more options. I think we're going to end up going to a more block or devoted time, and I think that's probably a good thing actually. What was your favorite subject?
I will say I really enjoy welding, kind of because you just get in a groove and, you do half class time, half in the booth, and the more you do it, the better you get. You learn things each time, you know. That would probably be a top favorite, especially with, the apprenticeship that I had plenty of booths, plenty of welders, plenty of everything.
Right.
Nobody, if you weren't welding, you chose not to weld, in a
Right.
classroom. So, um, I'll say that was a good one. And then when we learned part of the structural and bolt up, also again the apprenticeship I went through, the back half, it actually had they had a structure you could actually look at. It wasn't just prints, you actually had the
Hmm.
prints to the structure outside. Everything went together. You could take the measurements and everything was on point, everything was there. So it was kind of cool to be a part of that.
That's pretty awesome. Now, and now you and I knew each other before you coming on to this podcast.
Yeah.
So, like, I know the contractor you went to go work for. I know where you went to go work for. What when you first when you first came into this apprenticeship and you went to go work for a contractor, there is a lot, especially for ironworkers. I mean, electricians, and there's some other crafts that when you say what they are, you say a crane operator, for example, you're going to go into you know what you're going to do for the most part.
Yeah.
There's nothing really that's going to be but when you think about ironwork in general, there is such a broad jurisdiction. There's so much that the journeyman or apprentice ironworker does, and we
Mhm.
normally think of somebody else. They're doing some bolt up. They're connecting, but that's just a tiny piece of what ironworkers do. So, what was it
Oh yeah.
like for you? Because you probably had the same thought process, and then you get in here, and now you become what we routinely call our industrial ironworkers, and
Hmm.
that's a whole different ball of wax.
Yeah, well, it throughout even the entire 4 years, it was like a new thing each year that I'd learn, and I'd be like, we actually do that, It was just, it was dumbfounding. When I first signed up for ironwork, I'm thinking, okay, steel, metal, and that seems to be anytime I tell somebody I'm, you're an ironworker, that's the first thing I think of. Oh, you weld? No, hold on,
Yeah.
we do all kinds of things, But the first year, with that contractor, it was working in a shipyard, we'd move machinery. It was everything from moving machinery to building machinery. Sometimes working hand in hand with millwrights, swapping out hydraulic cylinders. And the next day, it's here, take this crane over here, and you guys, fly this stuff down to the dry dock. So, I mean, just in there, I got the industrial maintenance side. There was welding, there was cranes and rigging, and each day was different. Each day, for the most part, was different. You'd be sent to a different job to do something else. It's kind of like day trade stuff, Um, rolling into the second year, I ended up with a different contractor I ended up on a structural job. So that was, I mean, everything I had already seen, but now let's add the heights. Let's add,
Mhm.
you know, making sure bolts are inventoried. Let's making sure you got the right bolts in the right holes. Going back, doing your checks, buying spud wrenches. I borrowed the spud wrenches the first couple weeks I was there. I even thought they said 3/4 spud, 1 inch spud wrench. So I went on Amazon and ordered it. When I get it, these things are tiny because it was actually just for 1 inch bolts or 1 inch nuts and just for 3/4 nuts. So I'm like, oh God, at least they're my size.
That's pretty funny.
Then to go back and order the right stuff. I kept the other two. Now I can make some wind chimes out of them.
That's no,
but
that's awesome, man. That's awesome.
but
That's
yeah,
awesome.
so that was a whole new groove. And then when I jumped from there to where I'm at now, you got a little bit of welding, you got a little bit of fabrication. For the most part, you got cranes and rigging. So I mean, that was a whole new aspect of learning, different things here and there. What different slings are good for, what you can do with them to make them stronger. Anything from wire ropes to endless slings to 1 inch 20-foot nylons. Different things you can do with them to make them pick pieces up different ways. And then chain falls come along, and that's been a whole nother aspect. I didn't even know until I was in the apprenticeship program long enough that we actually did window glazing. I was like, what?
Yeah.
I didn't even know we're part of the window glazing crew.
Yeah, that's been my experience too. Is having to explain to people, and the welding thing is funny because you hear it all the time. So, oh, I'm an iron worker. Oh, so you weld? I'm like, yeah, that's just one little small piece of what we've done.
That's not even
And
getting into the bridge side rebar.
trying to
So
explain all of that to people. Sometimes it's just like unless you're in the building trades or whatever, and you want to take the time to explain it, especially given the fact that one of the things that I have been routinely saying is that registered apprenticeship programs, especially on the union side, are one of the best kept secrets,
mhm.
but they should not be. And the Apprenticeship Spotlight Series that we're highlighting here on the podcast is so important because don't just take my word for it. Let's talk to a whole host of people who have come through the apprenticeship and are getting all that experience in a more
Yeah.
robust way, and let them talk about that thing. So you know, which is a good segue into how has coming into the into the apprenticeship, finishing it up, how's that changed your life? How's that affected your life? How's that helped you out?
Well, I mean, it's simple to start. I was kind of, I'll say first and foremost, I was in shape, but I think I lacked drive. I lacked
Okay.
drive in different aspects. And then you get in here, you get with these group of guys, and everybody's got the same page you got. And it's a camaraderie, and I think the camaraderie plays into a lot of the different jobs I've always ever been on. Is you get in, you everybody's looking for the same thing. I'll look to do something, and the next guy's doing it. I'll move to something else. That's the next step. So each person is rolling like a machine. I think one of the biggest takeaways of the apprenticeship is really getting in, and at first you know nothing. And you'll get some foremen that like to teach, you get some that don't like to teach, especially your first year because they don't know if you're going to quit on them or not. You know, you don't know if you're going to come in, stay 6 months, and leave. So they're not really big into teaching. At least the older foremen weren't really into teaching people new things. Because hey, how do I know you're going to stay here? How do I know I'm not just wasting my breath?
Right.
But I
Right.
think it definitely gave me some drive, and you get to see a finished product. You get on something, even if it's just moving that machine 50 yards over that way. You started it, you finished it. Each project you get on especially from a start to finish perspective, you get to see finished product. You did that. You were a part of that. I know that's a big thing that I've seen on Facebook and a lot of that. From ironworkers driving through town, going, "Hey, I helped build that." But I've been clearly guilty of doing that. I'm showing my kids, different
Yeah.
things I worked on. Hey, I've been on that crane. Hey, I did that. I did
Yeah.
this. But it's just coming through. I learned more about myself too, about what I'm capable of. At first you might be scared. You never operated a forklift. Well, guess what? There's only one way to learn.
Hmm.
Uh, maybe this first machine that I was ever on that we moved, I didn't know anything about. Over the years, I saw the progression, and eventually, I've even been with a foreman now that we've been on a project. And I walked up to him and I said, "Hey, we'll use this, we'll do this, we'll do this." And he goes, "All right, boss." I'm nobody's boss, but my mind is moving and I'm already thinking of the next thing that needs to be done. I'm already in a groove of doing it. And even down to today. And the foreman I'm with now has been in the game probably at least 40 years. And I was trying to tell somebody operating a forklift, different controls, giving them different signals. And he goes, "Why would you do that?" And I went through the explanation process of why I would do it. And he said, "Okay, listen to him. Don't listen to me." And we did it, and it worked exactly as planned. And that's some of the best foremen I've spoke to. They'll tell you the same thing, is that we all learn off each other. You know, so I think that's a big thing, is the camaraderie, the drive that I got from doing this, and then just seeing finished products when you've started it and you've finished it.
Yeah. How about in the world today, there certainly seems to be, especially for young people, there's this whole big there's a big discussion, and we should be having it, as a matter of fact, of how inflated prices are. How people are like, man, I can't afford anything.
Man.
Off the top of your head, can you imagine? I mean, the trades have been really good. They've been good to me. They've
Mm-hmm.
been good to my family, and I want to give let's say, the floor to apprentices to be able to tell, hey, look, the trades have been good for me as well. And everybody on earth wants to make more money for sure.
Yeah.
But I don't think we make a bad living, at all.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I continually talk about that. And so, when you kind of think through that, is there there's a lot of other career possibilities that are out there that I don't think yield the same economic results as a career in the trades do.
Yeah. I mean, it goes back to some of the first jobs I had. You go to Kroger making $7.25. Back then that was minimum wage. But going from there to even, I also evaluated when I was in the military. I made $8.70 every 2 weeks. Now on top of that, your house, you get BAH stuff like that. But once you come down to it, you're like, okay, I make $870 every 2 weeks. I evaluated that, once I got into the apprenticeship, got into everything and looking how much I made every week, and I'm like, man, I'm bringing home at least, even in the first year, I was bringing home $500-600 a week. And I'm thinking, man, I make $1,200 every 2 weeks, not being in the military,
Right.
and and I'm learning something, and to know that I was going to get a raise if my hours matched every 6 months. It's like, well, the money's only going to go up from here, So
Yeah.
getting into that, I mean, like you said, we don't do bad. I mean, I could have not chosen apprenticeship and, Joe Smo could have only paid, $20, $21 an hour and not even paid into benefits. I wouldn't have any benefits. Still having to pay out of pocket for your rent, still having to pay out of pocket for benefits. And anytime you go to a hospital, paying for that, paying all these thousands of dollars for things, that just happen in life, but, especially now that I'm topped out, I mean, I've got, I can I won't say I can save money, but it gets easier to save money because now you know what you're working with, and you're not paying for all this other stuff you would have to do if you weren't in an apprenticeship, if you weren't part of a trade. Even on the non-union side, I mean, like I said, that's same thing. It's Joe Smo. All he wants to do is he wants workers. He'll pay you $15 an hour, and if you hit 40, you go home because he didn't want to pay you overtime. You know. And then you still go home with no benefits. You work late hours, and then the next 3 days you're at home. And I mean, why do that? Why go through that? Why not go through, have the benefits, have, decent pay, especially even with inflation. Like you said, even with inflation, starting out as a first year, you might start a little low, but every 6 months there's a raise coming. It's not something you're going to have to guess or go in and ask for or, wonder. It's there.
Right. You're covered under and this is a different podcast for a different time, but you're covered on contract, a collective bargaining agreement that specifically states, what is required of you, what's required of the contractor. Everything is laid out, so you don't have to go in there and say, well, hey, do you think I could get a raise? They go, none of that stuff is there. It's all contractually stipulated out, which is a good segue into one other point that I want to talk about. Registered apprenticeship programs are unexplained. They seem to sit in the unexplained corner. And one of the benefits that I want to talk about with you is what you said earlier. Your benefits are on top of your pay.
Yeah.
When I routinely talk to people, I'm always, I live in the land of opportunity, so I'm always having conversations with people. I'm always looking to explain to them the benefits that they're going to get by joining a union apprenticeship, a registered apprenticeship program. So explain what that means when we say that the benefits are on top of your pay, because this is something that a lot of people don't understand. But I think if we can drive that point home more, I think the more light bulbs you'll see go off.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll flash back to the military thing. I talked about getting BAH, you get your TRICARE, you get all that, and you're working. And a lot of the Joe Smo people, there's no benefits. They'll offer like a 401k if you're there long enough, And, I mean, for the places I work, all you did was tax forms. There was no benefit sign up. There was nothing like that, Heck, I hadn't even heard of PTO, you know. But the more I reflected back and forth, you know, each contractor, according to the bargaining agreement, different contracts, they are required to pay into the benefits, but they also they pay you. So we have a top out scale, but that's not where it stops. We make a certain amount, and like you and I both know, it's paid into benefits. So over the years, your pension, annuity, all that stuff is paid in. Medical benefits are right there, and you're getting paid. You're getting paid enough each week to keep floating, even with the inflation. I mean, I can only imagine if I didn't have the benefits, if I didn't have the opportunity I have right now, I can only imagine how much health insurance would have cost, or trying to go out and form my own retirement stuff. And some people stack it on top. It's not a bad deal, but just the biggest thing is helping on the health insurance thing. I mean, come on, you're working outside in the yard, twist your ankle. You go into a hospital, you sit there for hours, get charged hundreds and thousands of dollars, for them to put a brace on your ankle and send you out the door. It's a twisted ankle. Here's some 800 milligram ibuprofen, but it's just to know that, like, you go in and there's no worry. There's no worry of, I got thousands of dollars to pay back, because I know that my contractor is paid into my benefits, or knowing that years down the road, I've already got a retirement coming, as long as I put the time in, put the hours in, put the work in, it's there.
You bring up I'm really glad you brought up the health insurance, and I'm gonna reiterate what you're talking about. But the health insurance point, I definitely want to touch on, and here's why. That's one of the more significant points that people talk about who, let's say they don't understand the benefits, or they don't particularly care for them. They'll tell a lot of young people, you don't, that's not where you want your money at. You want your money on the pocket. You don't want any kind of health insurance. You don't need any of that stuff. You catastrophic or whatever. And not only is it very disingenuous for them to tell young people this, but the reality is when you're young, that you're probably going to have a lot of kids. You're probably going to have some kids too. And guess what? When you unpack the statistics, 2/3 of all bankruptcies in this country are due to medical debt. 2/3. So 67% of all bankruptcies are due to medical debt. Now, here's a very interesting point about this. Out of all of those that are due to medical debt, 2/3 of those were from people who actually had health insurance, and they still had to claim bankruptcy.
Yeah.
So that's a huge benefit, and I'm glad you brought that up, especially as somebody who's young, because that's the mantra from a lot of talking heads seems to be, well, you're young, you don't need insurance, and it's a bunch of bullcrap.
Yeah.
But for the benefit package piece that what he's talking about, for those of you who are listening, let's just easy numbers. We'll just use super easy numbers. Let's say that you get paid just a blanket $30 an hour. Well, if you go and you're working for Joe Schmo, we're going to use your term. If you're working for Joe Schmo, and if you do have benefits, that $30 is what you're getting paid, but you're going to pay your benefits out of that $30. If you do your numbers, and let's just say it costs you $5 an hour total for your health insurance, and let's say it costs you another $3 into your retirement, you're now not paying, getting paid $30 an hour. You're getting paid $22 an hour, because the other $8 an hour is going to those, that health care, and it's also going to your retirement. What he is talking about, very interesting point that needs to really be almost shouted from the rooftops. If we use that same $30 an hour, when you get paid, you're getting paid based on $30 an hour. Your health care, and then your retirement, which there's two different types of retirement, which is a total different podcast, but all of that is on top of the check. It's in addition to the check. It is, so you're getting paid 30, you're going to stay paid 30. All the rest of the benefits that you pay into, those benefits are on top of that. So total package might be, and I'll make this up again, maybe it's 45 an hour or something like that, cost to the contractor. But as an individual that's going to, join a registered apprenticeship program, that's an important point to make, because a lot of people don't clearly understand, the breakdown of what that is, right? So I'm glad you brought that up.
Because I mean, and you think about it, and some people might say, "Oh, well, total package is 45 an hour. I'd rather have 45 an hour. Yeah, you'd rather have 45 an hour until it comes time to actually pay those bills.
Uh-huh.
Then then it becomes out of whack there. I mean, I know for a fact every week that I'm getting paid, my X amount times X hours, and there's, like you said, there's nothing coming out. There's not $5 here coming out, every hour. There's not $3 here coming out every hour. It's there.
There's a lot of mentoring, I think, that needs to take place. And I want to give everybody a voice, a platform to sit here and tell me about their apprenticeship. But retirement's a huge thing because you brought up 45 an hour, you're going to get 45 an hour. I've never met someone who is older. Never. And I mean never emphatically. I have never met someone who said, I have saved too much for retirement.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what I have met, though. I have met every single person I've ever talked to has told me the same thing. I wish I'd have saved more, and I wish I would have saved earlier. And when you come into a registered apprenticeship program, that those retirement benefits are hammered out from the collective bargaining agreement so that you are actively saving from the first time you start, earning for the contractor, earning money, by going to work for the contractor. So hoping to talk to young people and emphasize the importance of indeed having that allocation for money for retirement, as well as the fact that, okay, well, you got a long term to save into the pension, as well as the annuity fund. So,
Yeah.
those are really good points to bring up. Now we're at 41 minutes now, so I want to kind of wrap this up just because I don't want to lose people's attention, but we could talk for hours. But if there was one thing that you could say, and maybe I'll have you back on matter of fact, I probably will. But if I could have, there was one thing that you could say to young people that could be listened, because I know what's going to happen. I'm going to put this out there, and then you're going to put this out there and share amongst people and probably different groups and whatever. If there was one piece of advice that you could give young people, that are either considering, they're looking for work, what would you say?
I mean, the quicker and younger at this rate that you can get into it, I mean, the better off you're going to be. Joining a trade, going through an apprenticeship, the quicker you do it, the younger you do it, the better off you're going to be. Like I just said, I can tell you, my body's not getting any younger, and some of these jobs are rough. But I mean, if you get it quicker, the retirement, you'll start putting stuff into your retirement quicker. You'll start building quicker. You think, at the beginning of this, I was 24, 24, 2 kids, and that was already rough. Like you said, I knew I was getting that raise every 6 months. I knew my hours were going to line up because I went to work. I had the drive, and I think one of the things I see with some younger people in this trade is just not enough drive, or they're too focused on other things, But I mean, if you get in, you lock in. I mean, 4 years later, I mean, I don't think I have a want for anything. If I want something, I go get it, It's
Right.
just you've had that time as an early apprentice to learn the ropes, learn how everything's going to go, and then knowing where your path is headed to plan things. By the time you get to that last year and graduate, I mean, you've already got everything in the bag. You've got a clue how things are going to work, and you can plan your money, you can plan your finances, and work around everything accordingly. Like I said, coming into this, I didn't have any goals or anything like that. I got to work. I got kids,
Yeah.
but the more you get, the more mature you get, the more experience you get, the better off you get. You start thinking about what's going to happen later in life. Like you said, nobody's ever complained about I've saved too much money. Nobody's ever
Yeah.
complained,
Yep. Yep.
the only thing you always hear is, hey, I wish I'd started earlier. I wish I'd done
Mm-hmm.
it earlier. I'm part of that crew. I didn't start anything earlier. Now I'm into something, I'm doing
Yeah.
something with it. So, and I think another thing, especially for younger generation, is we didn't really know how to get into. Some of us didn't know how to get into retirement funds, stuff like that, and some people may not know how to file for health insurance, or try to go through that process. And it's really effortless when you join something that's got the benefits already there. They may get some information from you, but they pretty much contact you for the information and set you up. So it's not like you're having to Google how to get health insurance, or how to start a retirement, and then going through that process. It's it's effortless, and it's getting to the point where when I started, things seemed tough. I got that drive, and now I love what I do. So
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. Well, look, I want to say thank you for coming on, sharing your information, your experience, being in an apprenticeship program and whatnot. I think it's been valuable. I hope, right, that other younger people might be listening. They get to have their thought processes tweaked a little bit.
yeah,
I think a lot of people, a lot of us, all of us need to have that tweaked actually. So
of course.
hopefully, there's people that will take this or run with it and they'll say, you know what, he's talking some good stuff. Maybe I need to seriously consider, an apprenticeship program and what it can do for me. So,
Yes, sir. Thank you for having me. I'm just kind of excited, to be on here and actually voice this, because like I said, I'm 28, 28 years old, and now I'm doing really good for myself, and I think that if somebody could take what I've said and apply it to their life and kind of see it from, my perspective, especially like if somebody's getting out of the military and wants to know what they should do next, how they should go about it, I think that'd be a great opportunity, the people that I've been around kind of have the same camaraderie you have in the military, but everybody's got your back. Everybody works on the same task, and I think this is a really good thing, you've started here, and I'm glad I could be a part of it.
Well, I can tell you this, it's my pleasure. You're helping me get the word out. In the age of social media, we're so connected, and yet we're so isolated at the same time. And so it's nice to be able to put out what I would say is, it's not humorless, but it's very informative and educational, done in a humoring way that I think the information needs to get out there more. And so it's my pleasure to have you on. So I really appreciate you coming on, taking the time, unpacking your experience, and telling everybody what we got going on, man.
Yes, sir. Anytime.
All right, brother. Thanks.